classes to read this, and I will never know if y'all are there or not. So if you stand up and sneak out, I won't know. All right, we're looking at Hosea. We've kind of discussed what's happening in Hosea. Now it's time to act like a teacher. Questions? What really destroyed God's people? The northern kingdom, of course, they constantly have kings that are trying to outdo each other and being worse than the last one. They constantly rebel against God. But what's the thing? One thing that God says actually caused their downfall? Lack of knowledge. That's that Hosea 4 verse 6 comment. That's one that just really needs to be underlined in your Bible. It's shocking how many people come up with explanations with all the different things going on in the world. This past week, there was a comment. Lou and I were discussing it earlier. There was a comment made that, the one really bad thing in religion is fundamentalism. Okay, what's fundamentalism? What's the fundamental things?
Belief in Christ.
Okay, believing in Christ.
Believe the Bible to be an inspired word.
Oh, wait a minute. Now you've gone to extremism.
Oh,
That's
okay.
a different word.
All right.
The things, fundamental things you think of, fundamental things as being, the things you learn in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade. That's the basics. And then after you get to junior high or high school or college, then you learn, hey, I don't have to do anything like that. One of my favorite examples of the difference between fundamentalism and moderatism is the idea that if you go by grade school math and you balance your checkbook and it says you have no money left, do you believe that? If you're a moderate instead of a fundamentalist, doesn't matter how big a checks I want to write, I can write as many checks. That's being moderate. Instead of being a fundamentalist. Most of us would probably say, that's ridiculous, is what that is. We need to be fundamental when it comes to the balance in your checking account. We need to follow the basics. The same thing is true with God, and that's the hardest thing in the world for people in our world to learn and appreciate. Any good idea that leads you away from God is wrong. And this particular discussion was saying, hey, fundamentalism, that's the Muslim religion and how they justify killing anybody that they don't like, hiding behind children, shooting out of hospitals and all. That's all right because you're the bad guy if you do anything against me. That's Muslim fundamentalism. And Christian fundamentalism is you believe that, that women should not be preachers, should not lead the church, that they can't be. This was a funny one the first time I ran into it. Do you realize that there are some places still calling themselves churches of Christ that have women elders? Somebody remind me of the qualification in either 1 Timothy or in Titus that disqualifies women unless they're homosexual and in a homosexual relationship. An elder must be the husband of one wife. So obviously, lesbian women can, if they get married, can be elders in the church. Oh, no, we don't want to go that far. But we just want to avoid some of the things that we don't like. So let's just get together and build the church that we like. You know, what kind of fun things could we do? Let's face it, instead of listening to the preacher, we could be eating brownies. Especially if Lou made them, huh? She could we could just make it a requirement that there are groups that, and oddly enough, this actually occurs in the New Testament in a congregation. We could make a big meal out of the Lord's Supper and then have a fist fight. Charles tried to get my plate and my favorite food, and I take it away from him. I punch him out. We laugh at that and we say that's ridiculous. Have you read 1 Corinthians, the 11th chapter? I know we often read past that point about the Lord's Supper, but read what they were doing wrong. They were fighting each other for it. And some people were just absolutely filled full. Another topic Lou and I were talking about earlier. Translation. There's a couple of American words that I still can't use. And she's sitting there laughing because she knows exactly which one. In American terminology, we would call someone that overeats or really gets a big meal like that as being what?
Glutton.
A glutton? What would they say? I am what? When you've eaten too much?
Pig or a hog.
Pig or hog or stuffed. You don't even want to know. We won't even go there in English terminology what that word means. That's about as ugly as you can get. And by the way, that conversation this morning also included the reminder to each other that every American preacher that preaches in an English-speaking congregation, be it Australia, New Zealand, be it in England, it's generally accepted by most congregations there that the first sermon or so is mostly cursing and swearing at the audience. Because those words just don't mean the same thing. And you think that, English, American, they're the same language. It doesn't work like that. And the key to knowing what the right words in the language are is what? I can pick on somebody here that's been to France. That got her attention. Wow. What do those French words mean? They're just gibberish, aren't they? Does it matter what you call things? How well do they accept just a bunch of, hey, I'm an American, I don't have to speak like that. One of the fun things in France, and apparently they haven't changed much in 50 years or more. Do you know why the French don't speak German today? Because of America. Do you know how the French feel about the Americans saving them from being a German colony? Overall, the modern French people, highly insulted. The Americans, they're the worst in the world. I mean, they save you and keep you from losing a war once, and wow, that's bad enough. When you do it twice, that's insulting. Maybe that's not what the insulting part is. Oh, but France saved the U.S. Okay, fine. But if you're at all familiar with the Revolutionary War, what was the attitude of America toward the French?
Initially, they were the enemy.
The Americans toward the French, after the Revolutionary War, they were the best people on earth. They were the greatest people in the world. And honestly, it was a lot of that feeling still instilled that involved the U.S. involvement in World War II. It's France and England against the enemy, so we need to help them out. They've come to our aid in time of need, and they just don't feel the same way. Different people have different attitudes about things, different cultures. When you go there, you cannot expect that culture to react to all the things that you're used to. If you don't believe that's true, drive out west of the Mississippi and order grits for breakfast. And you're going to get laughed at. In fact, 9 times out of 10, you're going to ask, what are grits? And why would anybody eat them? How do you get them? Where do they come from? Never heard of them. What do you get out the other side of the Mississippi River? Charles, you get to
Hash browns.
hash browns for breakfast. That's where it's at. Kind of funny, isn't it, how just regional differences. We won't even talk about those people up north. They're really strange, aren't they? So, when do you leave, Kelly? Speaking of that.
His surgery was postponed till the 28th of October.
Till 28th of October. Oh, okay. Okay. Kelly was supposed to be leaving this week, going up for her dad's surgery up north. Up north means more than just northern Alabama, Michelle. So we'll continue to keep him in our prayers. They think he's okay to go that long. Okay, good. We'll continue to keep Kelly and her dad and all of her family in your prayers. But with Hosea, he's forced to tell God's people that the reason that they're going to be destroyed as a nation is because y'all are stupid. You won't listen to God. Now, honestly, how many of you as parents have punished a child because they didn't listen? And even given them that lecture, I told you to do that or not to do that. Come on, I know that I'm not the only one. I need to see every single hand of a parent up there, and your time will come, won't it? It's just one of those things. By the way, you ever think about, we get discouraged as parents at times about the way our kids act, don't we? Do you realize that same relationship is what's being talked about here by Hosea? We're God's children. How do you suppose, isn't it funny how, and I see a lot of cartoons done about this, little cute comments, oh God, you just don't realize how tough it is being a parent with my kids. And can't you just picture God sitting up there shaking his head and saying, oh, you're as dumb as the kids are. Do you know what I put up with out of you? And that's essentially what Hosea is dealing with, what God is dealing with. God's people don't listen. And it gets ugly. It gets ugly. Gomer, of course, was she a prostitute before she ever met Hosea? Very possibly. At the very least, she was in spiritual adultery like the rest of all the kingdom of Israel. God tells Hosea to go take a wife out of prostitution. Now that's an ugly word, but God is using that to describe us and our relationship with Him. That just doesn't sound good, does it? That's not the kind of thing you want to be described as. So Gomer is at the very least familiar with spiritual prostitution. She's familiar with not serving and obeying God. One of the important things as you read the book of Hosea is don't miss, did Hosea really love this woman? Everything said there seems to suggest he loves her dearly. How much do you have to love her to forgive her when she runs away, when she has very possibly 2 children by other men, when she goes back to prostitution to the point that she becomes a slave? How much do you have to love her to go after her then? Yeah, and that's Hosea's whole point. That's God's point. Lesson to Hosea. Love in spite of sin. And boy, we struggle with that, don't we? Do you realize in the New Testament world the discussion that comes up to Jesus about when is it okay to divorce your wife? One sect of the Pharisees actually considered, my wife burned breakfast this morning. That's grounds for divorce. Mark, did your wife do the same thing?
No comments.
Wow. You think about it. And there's actually a sect of the Pharisees living in New Testament times, probably the ones coming to Jesus and saying, hey, is it okay to divorce your wife when she does something really bad like that? Is it really okay for God to divorce us, to simply leave us and commit us to hell because we slipped up and did one little thing wrong? Oh, if only that was all we did. But we like the idea, oh, God has to love me. No, God doesn't have to love you. Yes, God is love. But if you do wrong and insist on doing wrong, at some point, you will always reach that decision point with God where He says, I don't love you anymore. You deserve everything you're going to get. And that, of course, is the Apostle Paul's point in 2 Thessalonians. And he said, hey, I will let you, in fact, I will help you believe a lie. I'll send you a deluding spirit. I always think about that. That's a scary thing. Do you remember very similar words are said about Saul and his rebellion against God? God sent against him an evil spirit. I don't think technically, looking at a whole lot of other scriptures, it's as much God sending that spirit as God simply withdrawing His protection and saying, have at it. You remember He did that with Job? God simply allowed Satan, okay, have at it. I'll be honest with you, I don't really want God to trust me that much. I don't want God to withdraw His spirit from me and let Satan do whatever he wants. Jesus would tell something very similar to Peter. Satan had demanded that Peter be sifted like wheat. Any of you have a sifter? Ladies, anybody have a sifter? Just the old ones. Do you have a sifter? Yeah. Little handle? You're old too. Just remember that. Samantha's really old. You know what you use it for. It gets rid of those lumps in the flour. When you want it to be fine and need it powdered like flour is supposed to be, and instead it's like it is around here in the South, lumpy. You get that picture? That's what Jesus is telling Peter. So Satan has demanded to sift you. Does Satan ever sift us? The hard part is being strong enough to come back to God. And that is hard. Remember another story involving Peter. And this one I think about a lot. Here's Peter. He is in a commercial fishing business with Andrew, James, and John, their father, who knows how many other employees, because it mentions that they had other servants, other employees. They operate 2, 3, 4, perhaps 5 or 6 commercial fishing boats on the Sea of Galilee. How many times do you suppose Peter had fallen overboard and asked James or John or Andrew or one of the other employees for help? How many times had he pulled up a net that was too full of fish and turned to them and asked for help? Where do you look for help? To the professionals. If I want a little lowboy trailer with a gooseneck on it to hook to a truck to haul something big and heavy, I'm not going to ask Mark for it. I'm not going to ask Eddie for it. I'm going to go see Johnny. Hey, you know that rig sitting in the backyard there? I got something big and heavy. You go where you know that they can actually do something about it. How well did Peter know those men he had worked with for years? How much did he trust them with his life? And then in a storm, when Jesus is walking to them on the Sea of Galilee, and Peter sees Jesus walking on the water, he jumps out and Peter walks on the water to Jesus. Are you impressed by that? We tend to jump ahead in the story and say, oh, no, Peter didn't walk. Peter did walk on the water. But when he took his eyes off Jesus, when he began to look at the winds, the waves, hey, I've been out here before, and you know, people can't walk on water. What am I doing? And he began to sink. And you know the best part about that story is he turns around to John and says, throw me the life preserver. Send me the rescue diver. Is that the right way that it works? Is that what Peter said? Come on, I know some of y'all have read this before. I can sit here longer than you can, so. What did Peter do when he began to sink? What? Called out for Jesus. Lord, save me. I've often wondered if that's why the Hebrew writer, what he perhaps had in mind when he reminds us about fixing our eyes on Jesus. Look the right way where there really is help. Hosea's love for his wife, apparently his love for those children. You know the difference between a father and a dad? This gets discussed a lot in our world today. Anybody can father children. It takes someone special to be a dad, to really care. And we see that a lot in our world today. Anyone can be a wife or a husband. It takes someone special in God's eyes to act like it. Notice a couple of things. What was the Old Testament law for punishment for somebody that had done something to you? Remember? Eye for an eye. What else? How else does that go? Tooth for a tooth? A life for a life. We tend to think of that, and again, you suppose this is what Jesus was talking about when he said, you've heard it said? And told him, said, no, that's not what was talking about at all. Was God telling us that anybody that hurts you, let him have it? He wasn't? We don't think about that much. Do you realize that if you are speeding 5 miles an hour, 6 miles an hour, a lot of times they'll let different places, the police will let you get away with 5. You're doing 6 miles an hour over the speed limit, and the officer stops you. 2 things. Here in Georgia, number one, he's going to say, how come you're slowing up traffic so bad? The second thing is, he said, I need to give you a ticket for going over the speed limit. I'm going to give you a $100,000 fine and send you to jail for 6 months. Do you think that's fair? Is that the way a ticket for being 6 miles an hour over the speed limit works? There's a limit to things. And there's a limit to punishment. By the way, any idea, any wild guesses about where American law and English case law got the idea that there was a limiting amount of punishment that you couldn't go beyond, that it had to fit the crime? That comes from the Bible. In fact, American law had to circumvent some of the things in English law. Do you know what the penalty was in English law in the 1800s even? If Johnny owes me $100, now I made him nervous. He owes me $100 and he can't pay it. It's my right to have him thrown into prison. They even have a special name for the prisons that they were using for that. They're called debtor prisons. And he would sit in a jail cell until he paid that money back. Now somebody stop and think about that for just a minute. You take away his livelihood, you take away his business, you put him in jail for something. What are the chances he's ever going to, sitting there in a jail cell, come up with $100? Slim and none, huh? And by the way, a little plug, another plug for not visiting Australia, but only going to New Zealand. Do you know what they did, how they emptied a lot of those debtors' prisons in the 16th and the 1700s? They put them on slave ships and they dropped them off in Australia. Australia is peopled entirely by criminals. My wife's sitting there chuckling. She knows where the line came from. And it's still a joke to this day. No prisoners were ever deposited in New Zealand. So we're better than the Aussies. No wonder we beat them at rugby the other night. Again. Haven't lost in nearly 20 years, but hey, nobody's bragging here. Think about that. In an eye for an eye, God is limiting retribution and encouraging forgiveness. We don't often think about it that way, but that's essentially what God is doing. Now that's fun. There it is. And my Bible just froze. Well, we're going to fix this the hard way. What was God saying with an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth?
Doing to others as they do to you.
That's the way a lot of the people, even in Jesus' day, understood it.
You couldn't get
Okay.
Let the punishment fit the crime.
Let the punishment fit the crime.
And you can forgive them if you want.
Was there anything in the law that disallowed forgiveness? Do you remember under the law if, for example, someone had harmed you to the extent of a life for a life? Who had to cast the first stone?
The one without sin.
Well, that's New Testament, but think about it in terms of the Old Testament law. That's
The one who was offended.
okay. The guilty person sentenced to death must have their execution at least begin at the hands of the person that accused them. If you want, turn to, now that my Bible's back up, turn to Deuteronomy 17. Deuteronomy 17, verse 7. You get there? Somebody read that. Deuteronomy 17, verse 7.
The hands of the witnesses shall be the first against them to put him to death, and afterward the hands of all the people. So you shall put away the people from among you.
Okay. The term witnesses in the Hebrew there technically includes the accusers and the one who was wronged. I mean, wouldn't they be good witnesses? They're kind of the ultimate witness. So God is telling them, in the case of a life for a life, the first person to stone them had to be the accuser. Now think about it. The one who was wronged. Think about Jesus as they bring a woman caught in the act of adultery. Okay, first question. Who's missing? How come that if they caught the woman in the act of adultery, there had to be a man, and how come they didn't catch him?
You ran.
Obviously, he was way faster than the rest of them, huh?
Might have been one of the accusers.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it?
The purpose wasn't actually had anything to do with adultery, it had to do with trapping Jesus.
True. But they're claiming, and Jesus doesn't dispute it. He doesn't tell them, challenge them, says, hey, you guys, this really didn't happen. I saw it. Could Jesus know things that had happened? He never makes that argument. He says, no, that really didn't happen. You're just lying and making this up. He accepts the evidence that this woman has been caught in the act of adultery by someone. That would imply either her husband or the man's wife, to meet the terms of the law, one of those two. And apparently, if the husband is there of the woman, could he not claim the right to actually put his wife to death, being caught in adultery? Under the law, absolutely. So that doesn't seem to be the case, does it? Instead, it's we call them interested bystanders, or blood-sucking public, as we call them. By the way, when you've been on an accident scene and you've had everybody slows down to drive past a big accident on the road and rubberneck and see what you can see. When you've had people actually hold their little children up to the window so they can see the accident and what's going on there, you learn real quick why most people that work those things call them the blood-sucking public. They're more interested in what they can see, something gory, and honestly, social media hasn't helped that at all. We're a worse blood-sucking person. Grow up, people. It's time to act like we are human beings instead of acting like we're the dumbest people on earth. I realize that may still be true, but we don't have to advertise it. Hands of the accusers, the wronged one, the witnesses, shall be first against him to put him to death. What does Jesus offer in the discussion with the woman caught in adultery? Who does he say? And understand the picture here. He's saying you guys really don't have the evidence that the law required for you to do this. Now, everybody knows that the Jews would never lie and make up a story about anything, and false witnesses and everything. That never happens, right? Anywhere in the Bible. How many times in the law did God tell them? By the way, what for being a false witness, what was the penalty for that? Death. For lying before God, being a false witness. Are these people witnesses like they claim? Unlikely, because if they really were witnesses, they would have also brought the man. I don't care how fast he could run. Apparently there's a big enough crowd here that they could have tackled him. There's not even a discussion of the man and what should be done to him. It's all about her. Mark?
So just thinking, and probably not the direction you're going with this, but they brought the woman to Jesus to see if Jesus would condemn her to death. But that woman was never actually in danger of execution because they lived under Roman law and would have had to get Roman permission. The purpose wasn't really to execute her. That was never the question. The question was, will Jesus stand up against Rome and say, yes, stone her to death?
There's a couple little problems with that. Probably the first one that comes to my mind is a guy named Stephen. You ever heard of him? Did they get permission to kill Stephen? We don't care about Roman law. It took too long to get this Jesus guy tried and executed, and then they lost the body, and we had to pay off the guards. A lot more to that story, isn't there? But you think about it. Would the Jews go outside the Roman law?
Once you whip the mob up enough.
Exactly. So it's kind of in a sense, it's kind of an easy out to say, well, they couldn't really do anything anyway. Evidently, they were planning on it. And after all, if you haul her out in the sticks somewhere and stone her to death, nobody needs to know about it. And we get away with murder. Oh, it's just a woman, and I'm sure they already had their excuses made. Nobody will miss her. Even her husband doesn't miss her. I imagine they had the rest of the whole story plotted out. You know how it works with false witnesses. If they didn't already have the story plotted out, they would make something up. There was a famous writer once that said, always tell the truth. Because it's easier to remember and keep your story straight. You know who that was? A fellow by the name of Mark Twain. Or for some of you that have more education than Mark, his name was Samuel Clemens. But it's hilarious, isn't it? These people had no intention to do right. This is not about what's right or wrong. And God's law was everything about what's right and avoiding the excess. Never once in God's law is there a command not to forgive. Now, God creates an example of not forgiving with these people here that Hosea is writing to. Turn to Hosea, the 14th chapter. Kind of interesting the way God concludes this matter. By the way, what's the difference between a major prophet and a minor prophet?
That you wrote,
What's that?
that you wrote.
How much he wrote. So Daniel is a minor prophet. No? All those little book charts, it says that Daniel is one of the major prophets. How many books, how many chapters in the book of Daniel? 12. I just had you turn to Hosea chapter 14. Is it there in your Bible? So obviously Hosea is a major prophet. How come we lump him in the minor prophets? That's why I keep telling people that term major and minor prophets doesn't mean a thing. It really doesn't mean a thing. So don't sweat it one way or the other. Yes, many of the minor prophets are relatively short books, but then at 12 chapters, Daniel's not that long, and half of Daniel's 12 chapters are just prophecies. So that makes it even more interesting. Hosea chapter 14. Somebody read verse 1. Mark, you got it there.
Hosea 14:1.
Yes.
Israel, return unto the Lord thy God, for thou hast fallen by thine iniquity.
How did they fall? By their own hand. Anybody ever been clumsy before? Fall, drop thing once? I made a mistake once, Mark. It was because I thought I'd made a mistake and I hadn't, but that's the only one I ever made. We all the time are doing things, and it's really nice. I mean, I tripped over that acorn, that sorry acorn. I tripped over the bathroom mat. I tripped over that box. Why is that box anywhere in the house? And the reality is, whose fault was it really?
Not looking.
You can't blame the box. You can't blame the acorn. You can't blame the rug. But we can blame Betty, because she's got her hand up. Go ahead.
In this case, in every case that I can think of, we leave God. I doesn't leave him. God promised he won't do that.
He will not forsake us or leave us. He promises to help us even when we're down, even when we're struggling.
I mean, while we were yes and
Did God desert Job?
no.
Job's friends thought he did.
Those friends were very smart.
Exactly. Mark?
I think one thing we have to temper that with is our timeline is not God's timeline. Did God desert Joseph? No, but 2 years in prison is a long time for a man. Being away from his father for years and years is a long time for a man. So sometimes we may feel abandoned.
Because we feel it does not make it real.
There's really...
That's reality, sure there.
Sure, it felt that way to him. But you think about it. We stumble and sin. On the other hand, there's also another thing that Scripture talks about. Does God ever test us? I mean, when you tell your child to go clean their room, you're tempting your child, aren't you? To disobey. It's your fault if they don't clean their room, isn't it?
The consequences are right, though.
But if they do, if they're told to go do something and they fail to do it, then at least you can blame them that these consequences are yours. But can the child honestly tell their parents, it's your fault because you told me to go do something? If you hadn't told me to do something, then I would never have made that mistake. I would have stayed in my room, all the time and been perfectly innocent. God sometimes tests us to get us out to do things. He challenges us. We don't like the idea of being challenged, but it's time to quit and time to leave Hosea. Turn to Hosea chapter 14, verse 9. Somebody read that one.
Whoever is wise, let him understand these things. Whoever is discerning, let him know them. For the ways of the Lord are right, and the righteous will walk in them. The transgressors will stumble in them.
That kind of sums it up. Now, we don't like it too simplified, do we? So if you're smart, you'll do the right thing. What does that, by definition, make you if you don't do the right thing before God? Dumb as a turnip. Anybody know how dumb turnips are? I heard my grandmother say that for years. How somebody can be dumb as a turnip. Next time you go to the store, have a little conversation with a turnip and see how you get on. Johnny, be sure and hire a couple of turnips to work for you. See how much work you get.
Got them already.
That's the ones you already got. Okay. But you hear what God is saying. The ways of God are right. And if you want to do right, you'll do what God says. If you're going to do wrong, you'll do anything else, and you will complain bitterly that it's all God's fault. Transgressors, the ones that are doing wrong, will stumble over what God said to do. If you disobey God and you do wrong, there's just no way out of this one, is there? Okay, we're out of time. Next week, might have a look at the first half a dozen chapters of a book called Samuel, 1 Samuel. We're going to look at a guy named Samuel.